My name is Bianca Stevens. I'm 28 years old, live alone in a two-bedroom apartment just outside of Portland, and I make my living playing video games. Professionally. Yeah, I know it still sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. People always raise their eyebrows when I tell them. Like, Twitch streaming? Or, you mean you just play all day? I try to laugh it off, but the truth is, it took me nearly a decade to get here. To build an audience. To earn enough sponsorships to support myself. To carve out a space in a world that wasn't exactly built for women, let alone emotional, neurodivergent ones like me. But gaming saved me. It gave me control when life felt like chaos. It gave me escape when things at home got too loud or too cold. And eventually, it gave me a platform. A place where I didn't have to beg to be heard. I never thought that this weird little career of mine would become my lifeline. Or that the people who should have been cheering me on, my family, would be the ones most embarrassed by it. Especially Isla, my younger sister. Isla is 26. She's a nutritionist, married to a mild-mannered accountant named Aaron. She's pregnant now, about to be a mother. And I should have been there to celebrate that. I wanted to be. But I wasn't invited. To the baby shower. Let me say that again, because even now, it feels surreal. I was not invited to my own sister's baby shower. I found out from Instagram. From a cousin who posted a boomerang of a pink balloon arch and a table full of cupcakes with "Welcome Baby Harper" written in cursive fondant. And just like that, everything I'd spent months ignoring, the tension, the weird silences, the feeling of being slowly pushed to the outskirts of my own family, crashed down in one humiliating wave. You know that gut-sinking feeling when you realize you're not just excluded, but deliberately left out, like someone took the time to plan something around your absence? Yeah. That. So I did something. Something impulsive, maybe vindictive, maybe cathartic. I posted a photo. It was just me and Aaron. Sitting on my couch. Nothing inappropriate. He was on one end, I was on the other. But the lighting was soft. The wine glasses were visible. His hoodie looked suspiciously comfortable. And the caption? There wasn't one. I didn't need one. The photo spoke loud enough. Before all this drama, my life was relatively quiet. Not peaceful, exactly, but manageable. I worked odd hours streaming at night, editing during the day. My following wasn't massive, but it was loyal. I did okay. My relationship with Isla had been strained for a while, but I didn't think we were beyond repair. We grew up close, at least as close as two girls can be when one of them is always in the spotlight. She was the golden child. I mean that literally, blonde, glowing, always smiling like she knew someone was watching. Straight A's, team captain, prom queen. The kind of girl who looked like she belonged on Christmas cards and Pinterest boards. I was the quieter one. The weird one. Sensitive, prone to anxiety and late-night crying spells that mom never quite knew what to do with. When we were little, I adored her. Protected her. Took the blame for things she did just to keep her out of trouble. I even helped her hide a boyfriend in our basement once when Dad lost his temper over dating before college. But somewhere along the way, that sisterly closeness thinned into polite distance. Phone calls became texts, then dry texts, then nothing. I blamed myself at first. Thought I wasn't trying hard enough. I sent her birthday gifts. Commented on her posts. Asked about her pregnancy, about Aaron, about the nursery theme. Most of the time, Mom would say, "She's just busy, honey, you know how it is." But I could feel it, that shift, that slow fade from sister to stranger. The baby shower confirmed it. And the worst part? It wasn't just Isla who iced me out. It was the whole damn family. No one said anything. No one called to ask why I wasn't there. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Aunt Maggie, who used to sneak me Oreos at bedtime when I cried after nightmares. It was like they all agreed, Bianca doesn't belong here. So I made sure they saw me. One post. One photo. And everything changed. If you've ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own family, if you've ever been erased so thoroughly it makes you question your worth, I want you to know. I see you. And this is my story. The baby shower happened on a Saturday. A soft, gray afternoon where the light outside my window looked too delicate to carry the weight of what I was about to feel. I'd spent the morning editing clips from a sponsorship stream I did the night before, sipping lukewarm coffee and half listening to the hum of my apartment, telling myself that the silence from Isla was just normal, just busy life distance, nothing deeper, nothing personal. And then my phone buzzed. Not a call. Not a text. Just a notification. Clara added to her story. I tapped it without thinking, just a reflex, the way you scroll through other people's lives to avoid the emptiness in your own. But the second it loaded, my stomach dropped. Pink. So much pink. Balloons, roses, ribboned mason jars filled with lemonade and slices of strawberry. Everything coordinated, napkins that said, "A little lady is on her way." A cupcake tower, a game station with printable bingo cards. The camera panned lazily across a room full of smiling faces. Women in sundresses, laughter, champagne flutes, a gift table so tall it could have hidden a child behind it. And then I saw her. Isla. Radiant. Her hair curled in soft waves, cheeks flushed, that effortless glow that made her look like a living magazine spread. One hand resting on the swell of her belly, the other wrapped around Aaron's arm. They looked like perfection. Like a couple so deeply cocooned in love and anticipation that nothing ugly or painful could possibly touch them. And yet, all I could think about was how I hadn't known. Not a word. Not a whisper. Not a saved the date. I stared at the screen, thumb frozen, breath shallow, as the video looped again, Clara giggling beside Isla, someone in the background yelling, "Don't peek at the gifts yet." And my own name. My existence, conspicuously absent. No tag. No message. No explanation. I blinked. Tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe they'd sent the invite and it got lost in my spam folder. Maybe they assumed I was busy. Maybe Isla thought I wouldn't want to come. I opened our text thread. The last message from me was 3 weeks ago. Thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything, okay? Unanswered. I typed and deleted 3 different messages before settling on Bianca. Just saw the baby shower stuff on Clara's story. Looks beautiful. I hovered my finger over send, heart thudding. I don't know what I expected, maybe a quick apology, a hasty excuse, a promise to call. But I never hit send. Because before I could, another photo loaded. A group shot. Everyone crowded around Isla in front of the "Oh baby" backdrop. Smiles and laughter and arms around each other. And there, in the middle row, was my mother, wearing the blush pink dress she bought for my college graduation. Grinning. Standing between Isla and Aunt Maggie like this had been planned for months. My throat tightened. They knew. They all knew. It wasn't an oversight, it was a choice. And that's when the shaking started, not dramatic, not violent, but a subtle tremor in my hands, like my body was trying to reject the moment, to escape the memory before it fully formed. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at that image, willing myself not to cry, but it came anyway. Slow, hot tears down my cheeks, the kind that burned because they weren't just sadness, they were humiliation, abandonment, and a grief that didn't have a funeral. I called my mom. Straight to voicemail. I called her again. And again. Still nothing. Finally, I sent a text. Bianca. Mom. Did I miss something? Why wasn't I invited? 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. Then, finally. Mom. Sweetheart, I didn't think you'd want to come. It was just a small thing. You and Isla haven't exactly been close lately. Small thing? There were 40 people there. A catered spread. Custom floral arrangements. A professional photographer. And what did she mean? I wouldn't want to come. I tuped fast, fingers shaking. Bianca. You didn't even ask. I found out from a story post. Are you serious right now? No answer. I sat on my couch, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the thread like maybe, if I waited long enough, she'd explain. Tell me it was a misunderstanding. Tell me they tried. But she never did. The silence said it all. That night, I didn't stream, didn't eat, didn't turn on any lights. I just sat in the dark, lit only by the glow of my screen, scrolling through photos of a party I wasn't meant to see. And somewhere in that quiet, something in me hardened. It wasn't just about the baby shower. It was about years of being the difficult daughter. The one they didn't know how to talk to. The one who didn't go to college, the traditional way, who didn't get a real job, who didn't fit into their neat little mold. It was about every time Isla got praised for existing while I had to defend my choices like I was some kind of anomaly. It was about how they all smiled in those photos like I'd never existed. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and made a decision. If they wanted to pretend I wasn't family, then maybe it was time I reminded them I was still very much alive. And I had nothing left to lose. You don't really notice the moment you become invisible to your own family, not right away. At least it happens in increments, in tiny dismissals and gentle exclusions. Until one day you look up and realize you've been orbiting on the outside for so long that even the silence feels familiar, like a second skin you didn't ask for but somehow learned to wear. That Monday, I woke up still raw, still exhausted, my eyes puffy and sore, like I'd been punched in the heart from the inside out. And as I dragged myself out of bed and opened my fridge empty, of course, I hadn't eaten since Friday. I kept waiting for something to shift, for someone to call or explain or say, "We're sorry, it wasn't supposed to be like this." But the phone stayed quiet, and the stillness became a kind of noise I couldn't shut out. I kept replaying it in my head, the look on Isla's face in that video, that soft smile she always used when people were watching. The way Aaron stood behind her with one hand protectively on her shoulder like he'd been rehearsing the role of perfect husband for weeks. And every time I saw it, something inside me crumpled a little more. Like a paper left out in the rain, soggy and unreadable and forgotten. It wasn't just that I hadn't been invited, it was the way no one thought I would care. Like I wasn't the kind of sister who would want to be there, like I hadn't spent half my life defending Isla from Dad's cold lectures, or sneaking her snacks when she was grounded, or listening to her late-night rants about Aaron's weird quirks before they got married. We'd fought, sure, what siblings don't. But I never thought we were beyond repair. And yet, here I was. Alone in a room filled with echoes of laughter that didn't include me. I texted my cousin Clara. "Bianca, hey. Hope it's okay to ask, how long ago did Isla start planning the shower?" She responded with a voice note. I guess she didn't want to put it in writing. "Hey I think like a month. Maybe more?" She was super detailed, had a whole Pinterest board and everything. Honestly, it turned out gorgeous. "Sorry you couldn't make it." Couldn't make it. As if I'd declined. As if this absence had been my choice. I just stared at the screen, trying to remember the last time anyone in my family invited me to anything. Not holidays, not birthdays. Hell, I didn't even know Mom had gotten a new car until she posted about it on Facebook, captioned, "Finally upgraded. Number blessed." Like I was some former coworker she vaguely kept in touch with. I thought about our last Thanksgiving together the year before last. I'd driven 3 hours in the rain, only to find out they'd already eaten by the time I arrived. "Oh," Mom had said, barely lifting her eyes from the television. "We didn't think you'd actually show up." I remembered standing in the hallway, holding the pumpkin pie I'd baked from scratch because Isla had mentioned craving something homemade, and the way everyone looked at me like I was a distant relative who'd accidentally wandered into the wrong house. I left after 15 minutes. No one called to ask why. You'd think I'd have learned by now. But when it's your family, there's always this tiny, traitorous voice whispering, maybe next time, maybe they'll remember, maybe they'll reach out first. I sat down at my desk, tried to stream, tried to smile and play and pretend like my audience didn't notice the fatigue under my eyes or the way my laugh sounded just a beat too hollow. But I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to Isla, to the way her belly curved beneath that ivory dress, to the guest list full of people who barely knew her and yet still ranked higher than her own sister, to the fact that even quiet, awkward Aaron had looked more comfortable at that party than I ever had in my own home. And then there was Mom. Her response, "You and Isla haven't exactly been close lately," played on a loop in my brain, each word a quiet indictment, a subtle dig that made it clear the fault wasn't hers, or Isla's, or the family's. It was mine. I was the one who made things complicated. I was the one with the unusual career, the one who never gave them grandbabies or wedding albums or easy things to brag about. I was the one who always had feelings too many, too loud, too fragile. And over time, I think they just got tired of navigating me. So they stopped trying. And I kept trying. And now here we were. That night, I pulled out my old journal. The one I'd stopped writing in after things with Isla started to fracture. The first page was from 3 years ago, back when I was still hopeful. Back when I thought a few good conversations could fix everything. I flipped through it, reading old entries, watching myself slowly unravel in black ink notes about Isla canceling lunch again, about Mom forgetting my birthday, about the way I always felt like I had to explain myself just to be included. And suddenly, I was crying again. Not loud, not messy, just a quiet leak of everything I'd been holding back. I missed my sister. God, I missed her. Not the version from Instagram. Not the polished, pastel-filtered Isla with the curated life and the perfect smile. I missed the girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and make me swear I'd never leave her behind. And now, she was the one who left me. And maybe she didn't even notice. It's strange how the pain doesn't always hit you all at once. Sometimes it comes in layers, slow and creeping, like water seeping through a crack in your ceiling, soft at first, almost unnoticeable, until one day you look up and realize the whole damn roof is about to cave in and you never even saw it coming. That's how it's been with my family. They didn't throw a bomb into the middle of my life and walk away. They just peeled me back from the edges, inch by inch, until I wasn't part of the center anymore. After the baby shower, things didn't get better. They got worse. 3 days later, I got a call from Aunt Maginot to ask how I was doing, not to apologize for my exclusion, but to scold me, voice low and tight, like she was speaking through clenched teeth, like she was doing me the favor of not yelling. "You shouldn't have posted that photo, Bianca," she said. "It was inappropriate. You embarrassed your sister." I just sat there, holding the phone like it had turned to stone, my heartbeat thudding in my ears, trying to wrap my head around the idea that my hurt, my exclusion, my humiliation was somehow less important than Isla's discomfort at people asking why her husband was at my apartment. "She didn't even invite me," I said, my voice cracking on the last word, half out of shock, half out of exhaustion. "Do you understand that?" "No one told me. No one even asked." Aunt Maggie sighed, that long, weary sigh that made me feel 12 years old again, like I'd just spilled juice on the rug and she was trying not to scream. "Bianca, sweetheart, you've always been a little dramatic. You read into things. Maybe she thought you wouldn't want to come. You two haven't exactly been close." There it was again. That phrase. You haven't exactly been close. As if the distance between us was mutual. As if I hadn't been the one texting first, reaching out, trying to keep the string between us from snapping. I didn't bother explaining. What was the point? She wasn't calling to understand. She was calling to keep me in my place. After that, I started noticing the subtle shifts more clearly, the passive-aggressive messages, the radio silence, the way no one reached out to ask why I'd posted the photo, only to condemn that I had. My mother, of course, didn't call. Instead, she sent an email. An email. Subject: "Let's not make this bigger. Bianca, I know you're upset, and I understand that. But posting that picture was not the way to handle things. Isla is very emotional right now, and the last thing she needs is more stress. She's 7 months pregnant. This should be a joyful time. I'm asking you, as your mother, to delete the post and refrain from further drama. Let's not turn a family disagreement into a public spectacle. Love. Mom." Not a single question about how I was doing. Not a single word of regret. Just instructions. Delete. Refrain. Be quiet. I stared at that email for a long time. Not angry, not yet. Just tired. So tired of being the one expected to absorb everything, every slight, every exclusion, every cold glance, and missed call without ever letting it show. I didn't reply. Not then. But I kept the email. I printed it out, actually. Taped it to my wall next to the list I'd started an actual list off every time they made me feel like an outsider. It was longer than I expected. Dad skipping my first tournament stream because he didn't get that gaming stuff. Isla forgetting my birthday 2 years in a row. Mom telling me, over brunch one day, that she didn't tell her coworkers what I did for a living because it was too hard to explain. They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. They just erased me. And it hurt in a way I don't know how to explain. Not sharp pain. Not even clean pain. Just the slow disintegration of belonging. And yet, what broke me more than anything was the realization that it wasn't just about hurt feelings or misunderstandings, it was about hierarchy. About status. About the way they saw me versus the way they saw Isla. She was the mother-to-be. The respectable one. The success story. And I was the embarrassment. The wild card. The one who didn't go to church anymore. The one who streamed video games for a living and cried too easily and made things complicated. And so when conflict came, they didn't weigh both sides. They picked her. Every time. Even when I was the one bleeding. Even when I was the one left out. Even when I was the one who had spent years trying to stay close. That kind of betrayal doesn't scream. It whispers. And it sinks into your skin until you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are too much. Maybe you do make everything harder. Maybe you were never really part of the picture in the first place, you just thought you were because they let you stand at the edge for a while. And then one day, they closed the frame. And you didn't even hear the click. It would have been easier to disappear, to shut everything down, to delete the photo and the texts and the evidence that any of this ever mattered to me. To close the curtains on this ridiculous hope. I still carried the hope that someone, anyone, might look up from their curated, conflict-free version of family and realize they had left something real behind. But I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to be seen. Not as a mistake, not as a problem, not as the weird one with the streaming career and unpredictable moods, but as a sister, a daughter, a human being who mattered just as much as the one growing a baby inside her. So I started small. I reached out. I texted Isla. Not the passive, restrained kind of text people send to save face, but something real clumsy, honest, maybe a little too raw. Bianca, I know you probably hate me right now, but I just need to say this. I was hurt. I am hurt. Not being invited to your baby shower felt like a slap in the face. It felt like you decided I wasn't part of your life anymore, and honestly, I don't know what I did to deserve that. I miss you. Even after everything. I stared at the screen after sending it, heart thudding in that panicked, exposed way you feel after standing naked in a room full of people who don't even turn to look. And then I waited. An hour passed. Then 2, then 5. She didn't respond. But the message showed, read. That little gray word hit harder than I expected, not because it was cruel, but because it was indifferent, because silence was worse than anger. Because silence meant she saw me bleeding and decided not to offer even a tissue. Still, I didn't back down. I called my mom the next morning, voice steady but thin, like a wire pulled too tight. Can we talk? I asked. She hesitated, just long enough to sting. About what? About what's happening. About Isla. About everything. She exhaled long, slow, tired. Bianca, I don't know what you want me to say. You've always been so emotional. Isla just wants peace right now. That's all. I'm not asking for a fight, I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. I'm asking for space at the table. That's it. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I just want to know I still belong. There was a pause. I imagined her in the kitchen, holding the phone between her cheek and shoulder as she stirred her tea or wiped down a spotless counter. You make everything so heavy, she said finally. It's always about feelings with you. Sometimes people just want to move forward. I hung up before she could say more, because I knew if I heard another word, I'd scream or sob or say something that would be twisted into more proof of how I ruined things. But I didn't let it stop me. Instead, I made plans. I messaged Clara again and asked for Isla's registry link. She hesitated, sent me a weird eye emoji, but eventually caved and dropped the link in a follow-up message. I ordered a gift. A big one. The kind that makes a statement, not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted Isla to know I still cared, that I still saw her, even if she no longer saw me. It was a custom bassinet. Hand-carved wood, soft fabric, engraved with the baby's name Harper Grace. I included a handwritten card. Isla, I don't know where we went wrong. I just know that I miss my sister. And even if I'm not welcome in your world anymore, I wanted your daughter to have something made with love. I hope she always knows she's cherished, even by the aunt she might never meet. Love, Bianca. I dropped it off in person. Left it at her front porch without knocking. I stood there for a second, staring at the door I used to walk through without knocking. The door I once burst through after her engagement to Aaron with champagne in one hand and a giant, glitter-covered yes balloon in the other. I stood there and felt the ache of absence like a bruise pressed too hard. And then I walked away. That night, I streamed. Not because I felt okay, but because I needed to reclaim something. Because I needed to remind myself that I was good at something, that somewhere out there was a space where my voice mattered. I didn't mention the drama. Didn't cry on camera. But after the stream, I checked my messages, and tucked between fan art and random questions was a DM from a viewer I barely knew. Hey, I don't know what's going on, but you looked sad tonight. Just wanted to say thanks for always showing up. Your streams help more than you know. It wasn't much, but it was something. And when you've been living on crumbs, even a little kindness feels like a feast. I still hadn't heard from Isla. Or Mom. Or anyone else, really. But I'd tried. Not because I needed their validation though, God, I'd be lying if I said I didn't crave it, but because I refused to let them define me by their rejection. Because love, even unreciprocated, is still love. And effort, even ignored, still matters. Even when the door doesn't open. Even when the silence is louder than any I miss you should ever have to shout. It was a week later when the knock came, not frantic, not aggressive, but too deliberate to be casual, too heavy to be anything other than intentional, and for a full 30 seconds. I stared at the door without moving, something in my chest tightening as if my body already knew that nothing good ever starts with someone deciding to confront you face to face after a week of silence. When I opened it, Isla was standing there. No makeup, no curated smile. No Aaron. Just Isla, in a hoodie that might have been his and leggings that clung to her swollen legs, her hair tied back in a hasty bun that made her look more human than I'd seen her look in months. For a second, we just stared at each other. Her eyes were tired, and mine must have been too. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside so she could come in, and she did, slowly, like she wasn't entirely sure she should be there. She sat on the edge of my couch like it belonged to someone else, like every inch of the room reminded her she didn't know me anymore, and the silence stretched between us, uncomfortable and thick, until finally, she exhaled like someone bracing for impact. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but there was heat behind it, simmering just below the surface, and I knew exactly what she meant. Not the gift, not the card, the photo. I sat down across from her, arms crossed, a lump forming in my throat. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. I'd pictured her showing up, had imagined every possible version of the confrontation, but now that it was here, all my scripts vanished. "You didn't invite me," I said quietly. "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, like she wanted to throw something sharp and final across the room, but instead she let out a shaky breath and shook her head. "It wasn't meant to be personal," she said. I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitterness. "You invited everyone but me. How is that not personal?" She didn't have an answer, And maybe that was worse than if she'd said something cruel. Maybe the blankness of her guilt, the fact that she hadn't thought hard enough about it to justify a third more than any calculated rejection. "You make things hard," she said finally. "You always have." I felt that one like a knife, slow and twisting. "I'm not hard," I said, and my voice broke even though I didn't want it to. "I just feel things. You all act like that's a flaw." Isla looked away, jaw clenched, hands pressed to the sides of her stomach, like she was grounding herself in the one thing she had that I never would: this baby, this new chapter, this clean slate. "I didn't want drama," she said. "I just wanted one peaceful day. That's all. One day that wasn't about you." And there it was. The truth. I'd become the problem in the story she told herself, the mess to be contained, the tension she wanted to edit out like a bad line in an otherwise perfect script. My chest tightened. I stood up, needing space, needing movement, feeling too big for my own skin. "You think I wanted this?" I said. "You think I like being the one who always feels left out, who always has to fight just to be heard? I've bent myself in every direction trying to be palatable for this family. And every time I get close, every time I think maybe, just maybe, they'll finally see me, they shut the door a little more." She stood, too. "You chose your life, Bianca." "Yeah, and you chose yours," I snapped. "But only one of us got to bring our choices home and have them celebrated." Her face twisted, whether in guilt or anger. I couldn't tell, and suddenly she was crying, hands shaking as she wiped at her eyes like the tears were a betrayal. "I'm pregnant," she said, voice trembling. "I don't have space for this." And maybe she meant emotional space. Maybe she meant the weight of old wounds, the history we'd both tried to bury under years of polite avoidance. But all I heard was that I didn't fit. That there wasn't room for me now, that her life had become a postcard. "I sent you that gift because I love you," I said. "Not because I wanted attention. Not because I was trying to manipulate anything. I just wanted you to know that even when you treat me like a ghost, I'm still your sister." She looked at me then, really looked, and for a brief second, I thought I saw something break. But she didn't reach for me. She didn't soften. She just nodded, slowly, like she'd filed away everything she came here to collect. And then she walked out. No hug. No apology. Just silence. And the door clicking shut behind her. I stood there long after she left, staring at that closed door, chest hollow, breath shallow, knowing that confrontation didn't fix anything, didn't mend the years of quiet slights or heal the distance we'd both allowed to grow. But it clarified something. It showed me what I was really dealing with. Not malice, not cruelty, but detachment. Indifference dressed up as peacekeeping. A family that had decided I was too complicated to include. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to earn my place anymore. I just needed to decide if I still wanted it. It's the silence afterward that no one prepares you for, not the screaming matches, not the slammed doors or the gut punch words you wish you could forget. It's what comes after. When the echoes die down and you're left alone with the aftermath. Alone with your thoughts and your heartbeat and the knowledge that you stood in front of someone who once knew everything about you and somehow still couldn't reach you, couldn't even try. And that kind of silence isn't peaceful, it's suffocating. It presses in on you like water rising fast in a room with no exits. After Isla left, I didn't move for a long time. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, palms flat against the wood, like maybe if I stayed still enough I could anchor myself. Maybe if I breathed quietly I could pretend the confrontation hadn't happened, that she hadn't come into my space and confirmed what I'd feared for years, that I wasn't just misunderstood, I was disposable. The days after that blurred together, one long stretch of muted sunlight through the curtains and unopened emails and unopened messages, though there weren't many of those anyway, not from anyone who mattered, not from the people whose absence weighed the heaviest. And I barely ate, barely showered, barely did anything except lie in bed and scroll aimlessly, not even absorbing the content, just trying to fill the space with noise, with anything that might drown out the voice in my head whispering, over and over again, that I had finally become untethered from the people who were supposed to hold me together. I thought about deleting my social media. I thought about disappearing entirely. There was a moment Thursday night, I think, though time had already stopped meaning anything when I stood in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the counter, palms flat against the cool granite, and wondered if anyone would notice if I just vanished. Not forever. Not like that. Just long enough to see who came looking. Just long enough to test whether I still existed outside the guilt they pinned to my chest like a name tag. I didn't cry that night. I was past crying. I just stood there, in the dark, feeling the sharp edges of my own breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly empty, like something had been hollowed out of me, scooped clean, leaving only the outer shell of a person who used to believe in family and forgiveness and second chances. No one called. No one checked in. Not even after the gift was delivered. Not a thank you. Not even a text. It was like the bassinet and the handwritten card had fallen into a black hole, swallowed whole by people who didn't know what to do with the love I kept offering them, who didn't want to acknowledge what it cost me to keep trying. I checked Isla's registry again. The bassinet was marked purchased. That was it. No note. No sign of acknowledgement. And it broke something in me. I started dreaming about our childhood again, about bunk beds and flashlight whispers and the smell of popcorn on movie nights, about the time we built a fort under the dining table and pretended we were hiding from the world because it didn't understand us, and how we used to promise each other, with the sincerity only children can summon, that we'd never let anything or anyone come between us. But life came between us. Grown-up choices and unspoken grievances, and the slow, quiet way people drift apart when one person keeps showing up and the other stops noticing. I journaled. Pages and pages of thoughts that didn't make sense, loops of pain and memory and guilt, trying to trace the moment when things turned, trying to figure out if there was a version of me that could have been easier to love, simpler to hold, less inconvenient to include. And in the stillness of those nights, I started to wonder if they were right. If maybe I was the common denominator. If maybe this fracture wasn't something that happened to me, but something I'd caused. I thought about messaging Isla again. Not to accuse her. Just to apologize. Even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. For being too emotional? For wanting to be part of her joy? For not knowing how to ask for what I needed without making it sound like a demand. I drafted something. Bianca, I'm sorry if I made things worse. I really just wanted to feel like your sister again. That's all I've ever wanted. I didn't send it. Because the truth is, I wasn't sorry not for loving her, not for feeling things too deeply, not for posting that photo when I felt like I was drowning in erasure. I was sorry for letting them make me believe that I had to earn love. Sorry for thinking I could shame them into remembering me. Sorry for trying to carry the weight of our brokenness alone. But not sorry for showing up. Not sorry for fighting, even when it hurt. Some part of me buried beneath the fatigue, beneath the ache and the echo still believed I deserved to be seen. And that stubborn little part kept whispering, even as the rest of me shut down. Get up. Not for them. For you. I didn't expect the truth to come from Aaron, and certainly not at 1:17 a.m. On a Tuesday when the world was half asleep and I was curled up on the living room floor with a blanket over my shoulders, watching my own VODs with the volume low, not because I wanted to relive the streams, but because hearing my voice felt like proof I was still here, still breathing, still holding on even if just barely. And then my phone buzzed once, twice followed by the glow of his name on the screen, and for a long moment, I just stared at it, unsure whether to answer. Unsure what it meant that he was reaching out now, after all this time, after all that had been said and left unsaid. I picked up on the third ring. Hey, he said, his voice low, nervous, like he wasn't sure he should be calling, and I could hear the soft hum of a car engine behind him, like he'd driven somewhere just to have this conversation. Somewhere private, somewhere safe. Is everything okay? I asked, heart suddenly racing, because if Isla had gone into labor or something had happened to the baby, this was not how I wanted to find out. No, yeah, I mean, everything's fine. With Isla, I mean, she's fine. The baby's fine. He paused, and in that breath I heard something unraveling, something fragile and real, and I sat up straighter, pulled the blanket tighter. I need to tell you something, he said. There was a silence. I didn't fill it. He continued, voice strained. She asked me not to talk to you. Months ago. After your birthday, when you texted about grabbing coffee and catching up. She saw the message. Said it made her uncomfortable. Said she didn't want me to encourage anything. My heart froze, then thudded once, heavy and low like a dropped weight. I thought maybe you already knew, he said, that she'd told you. I didn't respond right away. My mouth was dry. My thoughts loud. She told me you two weren't close anymore, he added. Said there was a lot of history. That you had a tendency to overstep. There it was again. That word. Overstep. Like caring too much was trespassing, like wanting to be included was a breach of contract. I could barely breathe. He went on, quietly. Bianca, I've always liked you. You know that. You've been nothing but kind to me. Supportive. You were the first one who made me feel welcome when Isla brought me home. But after the wedding, she started changing how she talked about you. It was subtle at first, little comments. Then one day she just said she didn't want you around as much. Said your energy was draining. Said you always made things about you. My vision blurred. I pressed a hand to my mouth. I didn't know what to do, Aaron said, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't want to cause tension. She's my wife. And then when you posted that photo, she lost it. She told everyone you were trying to sabotage her. That you were jealous. That you wanted attention. I didn't know she hadn't invited you. I swear. I thought maybe you just didn't show up. Oh, it hit me then all at once that the narrative had been spun long before the baby shower, that somewhere between wedding registries and holiday cards, Isla had rewritten our history in her own voice, painting herself as the victim and me as the disruptor, and the rest of the family, so desperate for simplicity and smiles and easy dynamics, had bought it without question. I was the problem because she told them I was. Not because of what I did, but because of how she wanted to be seen. Aaron cleared his throat, sounding ashamed. I shouldn't be telling you this. But you deserve to know. You're not crazy, you're not wrong. You've just been on the outside of a version of the story you didn't get to write. And with that, something inside me snapped not in a destructive way, but in the way a chain finally breaks under tension, in the way a dam cracks, and the water doesn't just trickle, it roars, it floods. It claims its space after being held back for too long. I thanked him, voice flat, stunned. He apologized, again and again, but I'd stopped hearing the words. I was already somewhere else mentally, emotionally digging through years of interactions with Isla, with Mom, with everyone who had nodded sympathetically while quietly closing ranks against me. And I realized then that I'd spent my entire adult life trying to earn the trust of people who never wanted me on equal ground to begin with. The next morning, I got up early. I made coffee. I washed my face. I did something with my hair. And then I opened my laptop and drafted a long, deliberate post, not vague, not petty, not dramatic, but honest. I didn't name names, but I named the pain. I talked about what it feels like to be alienated by the people you love. I talked about how subtle exclusion is still abuse. I talked about the myth of keeping peace by silencing the person who makes you uncomfortable simply because they hold up a mirror. And I ended it with this. I'm done fighting for a seat at a table where I'm not welcome. I'm building my own table now. And the people who sit there will know how to listen, how to apologize, how to love without conditions. I wish them well. But I wish myself better. I posted it. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the sunlight pouring through the window, letting it warm the parts of me I'd kept cold out of fear. I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in weeks, I felt awake. And I was done being quiet. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't give them the courtesy of preparation, didn't soften my arrival with a warning text or a polite knock. I just showed up, uninvited, the way they'd made me feel for years. And as I stood on my mother's porch with the October wind curling around my ankles and the old chimes clattering behind me, I realized I wasn't nervous not anymore, not because I was certain of what I'd say or how they'd take it, but because I was done asking for permission to exist in rooms I had every right to walk into. The door opened before I knocked. Mom stood there, surprised, her lips parting but no words coming out at first, and in the gap between her inhale and her greeting, I saw the flicker of calculation. The mental scramble of someone adjusting their mask too late. "Bianca," she said slowly, like I was a question she hadn't studied for. "Is everything all right? I need to talk to you." I said, voice level, not angry, not gentle, just steady in a way I hadn't been in a long time. She stepped aside, and I walked in without hesitation, the familiar scent of lemon polish and lavender laundry detergent hitting me like muscle memory, like I was 16 again. Standing just inside the threshold and wondering whether I was welcome or merely tolerated. Isla was there, sitting at the dining room table, one hand on her swollen stomach, the other wrapped around a half-full mug of tea. And when she looked up and saw me, her eyes narrowed, not in shock, but in that weary, defensive way that told me she'd already braced herself for me to become a problem before I opened my mouth. I didn't sit. I didn't offer pleasantries. I just began. "You've been telling people things about me," I said, staring at Isla directly, no flinching. "Things that aren't true, things that have shaped how our family sees me." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and before she could protest, I lifted a hand. "Don't interrupt me, not this time." Mom stepped forward, arms folded like she was trying to contain the scene before it started. "Bianca, maybe this isn't the best. It's the only time I'm going to say this," I cut in, still calm, still grounded. "And you're both going to listen." Isla's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. "Aaron told me," I continued. "He told me about how you asked him not to speak to me. How you told him I was unstable. That I overstepped, that I always make things about me." A muscle jumped in Isla's jaw, but she didn't deny it. "And you," I said, turning to Mom, "you believed her. Without asking me. Without even once picking up the phone to hear my side. You let her turn me into the villain in this family narrative because it made things easier." "I didn't," Mom started. "You did," I said. "You let her erase me. You helped her." I saw it, then saw the recoil in my mother's expression, not because she thought I was wrong, but because I wasn't supposed to say it out loud, wasn't supposed to bring the quiet betrayals into the open, wasn't supposed to stand here in my truth and make them look at the mess they'd swept under the rug for years. "You've always made everything emotional," Mom said, her voice shaking. "We've had to tiptoe around you your whole life." "Because I felt things?" I asked, incredulous. "Because I asked for kindness? Because I noticed when I was being pushed aside?" She didn't answer. Isla set her mug down. Hard. "You don't get to barge in here and make yourself the victim," she said. "I've had to deal with so much stress, and you. I loved you." I said, louder than I meant to, my voice suddenly thick. "Do you understand that? I loved you. Even when you pulled away. Even when you stopped inviting me. I showed up. I kept trying. I never stopped being your sister, even when you stopped being mine." Isla's face crumpled for a second, just a second, and I saw a flash of the little girl who used to fall asleep with her head on my shoulder during thunderstorms, who used to beg me to braid her hair before school, who used to say, "Don't ever leave me, B." "I didn't ask you to stop loving me," she muttered. "No," I said softly. "But you punished me for doing it out loud." And then I turned back to Mom. "I've been bending myself in half trying to make you proud," I said. "Trying to fit into this mold of what a daughter should be, what a woman should be, and the second I didn't look like Isla, you decided I wasn't enough. I've heard you talk about her job, her wedding, this baby. But when people ask about me, you smile and change the subject. I know, I've seen it. I feel it." The room was still now. Heavy. Real. "I'm done being silent," I said. "I'm done begging for scraps of love that should have been given freely. If you want me in your life, it will be on new terms. No more pretending. No more selective affection. No more letting Isla rewrite history because it suits her comfort. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I stepped back. Not in defeat. In freedom. Because this time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I wasn't waiting for their tears or their apologies or even their understanding. I had said what needed to be said. I had made myself heard. And whatever they did with that truth was no longer my burden. So I walked out. Not because I gave up on them, but because I finally chose myself. There's a quiet that follows after you finally say the thing you've been holding for years, a silence not made of tension or fear, but of space, the space you've finally carved for yourself, the boundary newly drawn, sacred and wide. And in that space, you start to feel yourself return, piece by piece, like your soul had been waiting just beyond the noise for you to make room for it again. And that's what the days felt like after I walked out of my mother's house, not triumphant, exactly, but clear, like I had stood on a battlefield long enough to know the cost of peace and was finally willing to pay it. I didn't expect applause. I didn't expect overnight healing or teary apologies or a sudden reordering of loyalties. I didn't even expect them to call. But they did. Not right away. It took 3 days for the first message to come through, from Clara, short and almost absurdly casual. Clara. Damn girl, that was intense. But good for you, honestly. I read it and didn't respond, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't know how to explain that validation feels different when it comes after the fact, like praise for surviving a fire someone watched you burn in. But then more came. Messages. Emails. Quiet acknowledgments from cousins, old friends, even a few aunts who had been present at the baby shower and had said nothing then but were now inching forward with tentative empathy, like they'd just realized they were complicit. It wasn't the kind of apology you dream about. But it was something. A ripple. And in the midst of it all, Erin messaged me again. Erin. I told her I think you were right. She's not speaking to me right now, but I had to say it. You deserved better. I stared at that message for a long time, heart thudding, not because I needed him to pick sides, but because hearing someone say it plainly, without defense or excuses, opened a crack in me I didn't know was still sealed shut. It wasn't about vindication. It was about being seen. I responded simply, Bianca, thank you. That means more than you know. And that was it. I didn't need to say more. Because the shift had already started. For the first time in years, I started streaming not to prove something, not to distract myself from the ache of rejection, but because I wanted to, because I felt whole enough to share again, felt grounded enough to hold space for joy and humor and connection without it feeling like a mask. My followers noticed. The chat lit up with things like, you seem lighter, and whatever you're doing, it's working, and for once, I didn't deflect the compliments. I let them land. And somewhere in that week, my inbox pinged again, this time from Mom. It was a longer message than I expected. Not perfect, not absolution, but honest. Bianca, I've been thinking about everything you said. I won't pretend it didn't hurt, but I also won't pretend you were wrong. I let myself believe things about you because it was easier than questioning them. I let Isla's version of things become the truth because it spared me from having to deal with conflict. That's on me. I don't know how to make this right overnight. I don't expect you to forgive everything, but I want you to know I hear you now. I see you. If you ever want to talk, my door's open. I reread it 3 times. And for the first time in a long time, I cried not from pain, but from relief. Because it wasn't just about words, it was about effort. About someone finally stepping forward instead of asking me to come crawling. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit. Let her sit in it, too. Because part of growth is knowing you don't have to rush back into someone's arms just because they finally noticed you were gone. But later that week, I did reply. Bianca, thank you. I'm not ready yet. But maybe someday. It was enough. It felt like enough. Then came the final message. Isla. It was shorter than I thought it would be. No grand apology. No breakdown. Just this. Isla. I read your post. I'm still angry. But I'm also not proud of how I handled things. I think I need time to figure out who I am outside of trying to be perfect. Maybe you do too. It wasn't closure. It wasn't even reconciliation. But it was truth. And maybe, after all these years of swallowing silence and pretending everything was okay when it wasn't, that was more valuable than forgiveness. Because the truth is, I didn't need her to make it up to me. I just needed her to stop pretending she'd done nothing wrong. And now that the masks were off, now that the ugly, complicated, real version of our story had been named out loud, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't broken anymore. I'd done the hardest thing a person can do. I'd told the truth when it cost me everything. I'd stood alone when no one clapped. And, somehow, I was still here. Stronger. Sharper. Freer. So when the next invitation came, a small brunch Clara was hosting, nothing major, just a few cousins, some family I hadn't seen since the holidays, I didn't immediately say no. I didn't say yes either. But I paused. I considered. And that pause felt like progress. Because now, I was choosing. I wasn't begging for inclusion. I wasn't shrinking to fit. I was standing fully, unapologetically, as myself. And maybe that's the real victory. Not that they changed, but that I no longer needed them to, in order to breathe. Healing doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic music swelling in the background. It arrives quietly, sometimes so quietly you don't recognize it at first, like a familiar scent drifting through an open window, like the absence of pain where it used to live full-time, and that's how it started for me. Not with Isla calling to say she was sorry or Mom begging for forgiveness, but with mornings that didn't feel like war and afternoons where I caught myself smiling at nothing in particular, a stillness in my chest I hadn't felt in years, like my body finally trusted me to be safe inside it. I didn't go to Clara's brunch. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, not out of spite, but because I was learning slowly, gently, that peace isn't just something you seek from others. It's something you protect once you find it, and the thought of sitting across from familiar faces pretending not to remember the months they stayed silent made my stomach tighten in a way that didn't feel like growth yet, so I stayed home. I spent that Sunday walking through Forest Park with my headphones in, letting the music cradle me, letting the trees remind me that change doesn't have to be loud to be real. Autumn had arrived quietly too. Leaves falling like gold coins, air cool but not cold. And I thought about how I used to dread this season. How it always felt like a countdown toward another holiday spent pretending I didn't feel like a guest in my own bloodline. But this year, it felt different, like maybe the endings weren't always about loss. Maybe some of them were about release. I took a photo of the trees, posted it without a caption, and for once it wasn't a coded message, not a cry for attention or proof of strength, just a simple moment I wanted to remember, because joy, when you've lived through absence, becomes something you learn to document quietly. The next week, I got an email from a mental health podcast that had found my post, the one I wrote after Aaron's call, the one that started everything, and they asked if I'd be willing to talk, to tell my story not as gossip or clickbait, but as survival, as proof that family pain doesn't have to be your ending. I said yes. Not because I needed to be heard by strangers, but because something inside me whispered that this story was never just mine, that maybe there were others, women like me, siblings in the shadows, daughters holding wounds their mothers never acknowledged, who needed to know they weren't crazy for wanting love that didn't require self-erasure. The interview was soft, kind, held in a tone that felt like safety. We talked for an hour. I cried. Once. Not because I was triggered, but because I finally said the words out loud in a way that didn't shake my voice. You can love someone deeply and still choose to walk away from the version of them that refuses to see you. When the episode aired, my inbox flooded not with trolls or critics, but with quiet messages from people who understood. People who said things like, "You told my story," and "I thought I was alone." And this helped me call my sister for the first time in 2 years. I didn't reply to every message, but I read them all. And each one stitched something back into me. Because for the first time in my life, my pain wasn't just pain, it was purpose. I still hadn't spoken to Isla, but I followed her online. Quietly. I saw the photos she posted after the baby was born. Hands, sleep-heavy eyes, Aaron's tired grin as he held their daughter like something sacred, and I felt the ache, yes, that old familiar pull of what might have been, but I also felt something else. I felt pride. Because Harper was beautiful. And I knew I would have loved her. Still might, someday. Weeks passed. Then months. The world kept turning. Mom sent a message now and then. Little things, articles she thought I'd like, a recipe she used to make when I was little, an invitation to a low-key dinner I hadn't yet said yes toned. I let her, not with resentment, but with the boundaries I'd bled to build. I started writing again, not just journal entries, but real writing. I pitched a column about family estrangement and emotional resilience to an online magazine, and, to my shock, they accepted. Suddenly, I had deadlines. A small following. A rhythm. I kept streaming, but now I balanced it with writing, and somewhere between editing highlight reels and writing essays about forgiveness, I found something I hadn't known I needed. I found my voice. Not the version I'd used to please them. Not the version I'd dulled to avoid conflict. But the voice that was sharp and soft and mine. And then, one night in December, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a baby blanket. Soft. Hand-stitched. With my name embroidered in the corner. Just one word. Auntie. No note. But I didn't need one. Because that was Isla's handwriting. And suddenly, the tears came. Not because everything was fixed. Not because we'd magically gone back to who we were before. But because maybe, just maybe, this was how healing starts. Not with a speech. Not with an apology. But with something soft handed across the space between you. And you get to decide whether you reach back. I held that blanket for a long time, sitting in the quiet of my apartment, the lights dim, the world hushed outside, and for the first time since this story began, I didn't feel like a storm waiting to be understood. I felt like someone who had survived the rain. Someone who could finally sit still without drowning in the stillness. I messaged Isla that night. Just 2 words. Thank you. She didn't reply right away. But 3 days later, she sent a photo. Harper. Eyes wide. Wrapped in that blanket. The caption said, "She likes your voice." I didn't understand it at first. Then I remembered the stream I did late at night, the lullabies I sang between levels when I was too tired to speak but didn't want to log off. Maybe Isla had watched. Maybe Harper had listened. Either way, it meant something. And sometimes that's all you need. A quiet truth. A tiny bridge. A reason to believe that not everything broken stays that way. If you'd asked me 6 months ago how this story would end, I probably would have said it didn't, that it would just keep going, like some ache that never quite healed, like a hallway that kept folding into itself no matter how many doors you tried to open. But standing here now, months removed from that raw, bitter season of exclusion and grief, I can tell you that sometimes the ending isn't an explosion or an apology or even a clean goodbye, but a quiet shift inside you. A breath you didn't know you were holding that finally releases, and that is its own kind of closure. Because no one teaches you what to do when the people you love most are the ones who make you feel the smallest, and there is no instruction manual for how to forgive someone who never really said, "I'm sorry." No checklist for how to rebuild trust on ground that's been scorched over and over by silence and passive rejection and the quiet rewriting of history that happens when people pretend your pain was all in your head. And yet, somehow, I'm still here. Still loving. Still healing. Still trying. I think the biggest lesson I've learned more than any dramatic revelation or cathartic confrontation is that healing doesn't require everyone else to change, only that you stop betraying yourself in the name of being accepted. That's what I did for too long. I edited myself, dulled my edges, shrunk my feelings into shapes that would fit into the tight, shallow spaces my family left for me, mistook tolerance for love, silence for peace, and guilt for proof that I was always the one who needed fixing. But I know better now. I know that being sensitive is not a flaw. I know that feeling deeply doesn't make me dramatic, it makes me alive. And I know that love without respect is just manipulation dressed in soft tones and hollow smiles. There's a specific kind of grief that comes with surviving your own family, a grief that isn't about death but about distance, about knowing that the people who held you once don't know how to hold you now, and maybe never did, and you have to mourn not just what you lost, but what you never got to have in the first place. I've spent too many nights trying to figure out what was wrong with me, why I wasn't easier, simpler, quieter, why I couldn't just laugh things off like Isla. Why I cried at commercials and felt tension in rooms before anyone spoke. Why I always wanted conversations that went deeper than how's work and what's for dinner. And the truth is, nothing was ever wrong with me. I was just asking for more than they knew how to give. And that's okay. That doesn't make them evil. It just means I had to find what I needed elsewhere. I found it in my community, strangers who became friends, followers who sent messages that landed like bomb. Viewers who saw me not as the girl who ruined a baby shower, but as a full human being with a heart too big and a voice too raw to fit into the boxes she was handed. I found it in the long walks, in the blank pages of my journal, in the quiet moments when I made tea and sat with my own thoughts without trying to escape them. In the rediscovery of a self I'd buried beneath years of emotional gymnastics. And slowly, I found it in my family too, not in grand gestures or fairy tale reunions, but in small things. A text from mom that didn't ask anything of me, just said, "Saw this and thought of you. I him." A photo from Isla that didn't come with a caption, but didn't need one either. A baby blanket mailed without a note. Tiny bridges being built across broken ground. And I've learned not to rush across them, not to sprint back into old patterns at the first sign of warmth, but to let them stand, to see if they hold, to decide if I even want to cross. Because I get to choose now. That's the part I never understood, that love isn't a trap or an obligation or a test I keep failing. It's a choice I get to make with every boundary I enforce, with every version of myself I refuse to abandon just to make others comfortable. I can love my family and still protect myself from them. I can hold space for their efforts and still acknowledge their harm. I can walk toward them slowly and still walk away if they forget again how to treat me. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Isla and I will ever be what we once were, or if we'll become something new, something honest, something that doesn't require pretending. We may never braid each other's hair again, may never fall asleep whispering in the dark, but maybe someday we'll sit across a table and talk about motherhood and memories and the distance between us without trying to minimize it. And that will be enough. I don't need a perfect ending. I just need peace. And I have that now. I wake up without the weight of proving myself. I answer the phone when I want to, not out of fear or duty. I create because it brings me joy, not because I'm trying to prove I matter. I exist fully, deeply, freely. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt the sting of being the one left out, the one misunderstood, the one too emotional or too different or too much, please know this. You are not too much. You are not too late. You are not broken. You are just a person who sees the world in all its sharpness and color and ache, and maybe that scares people who've only ever learned to love through silence. But don't let that dim you. Don't let their fear define your worth. You deserve to be heard without being hushed. You deserve to take up space without apology. You deserve a family even if you have to build it from the ground up. And maybe, just maybe, the love you create on your own terms will be the kind that finally feels like home.